Ahead of the monster fight between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford, there's one massive question that everybody is asking. Just how much is weight going to influence the outcome of this fight? Will Canelo Alvarez, who's been competing in a much higher weight division than Crawford for quite some time now, just be too big for him? And will Crawford be better than ever, up at 168 pounds for the first time in his career? In this video, I'm going to try and give context to the weight divide, the gap between the two men, and how I think it might impact the outcome of this fight. Because part of me says it's too much. This is an insurmountable challenge. But then another part of me says, actually, we've got some clues and some hints that allow us to think that this might be okay, that the weight might be okay for Terence Crawford. We're going to get into it all in this video. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. Today, we're in a bit of an idyllic setting. I am on my holidays. Cheers, everyone. And it's beautiful. I'm enjoying myself very much here in France. But the hype for this fight, Canelo against Crawford, cannot stop. And I really wanted to make a video, one last video, about the size of the two men before the fight comes. Because I really do think this is such a significant factor. You know, we did the tactical breakdown, which a lot of you enjoyed. We pointed out a few, what I felt were the most important factors going into this fight. But, you know, we always consider every angle on this channel. There's the mental side of it that we're yet to talk about. There's the tactical side, of course, but then there's also the physical side of this. And I think size and weight, you know, we can break it down tactically as much as we want, but size and weight could actually be the thing that is most decisive in this fight. Now, you guys will have seen that I previously made a video about Terence Crawford and how big I think he actually is, because there's a lot of speculation about Crawford's size. There's been a lot of people saying he's actually potentially even bigger than Canelo, and we sort of crushed that idea. But in reality, I don't think it's going to be too bad. If you want to go and check that out, I'll put the link in the comments below or in the description below, and you can see where I landed on that one. It was a process that I went through to figure out how big I really think Crawford is as a man, walking around when he's out of camp, when he's in camp, and what he actually weighs on fight night when he rehydrates. What's the heaviest weight we've got Crawford weighing on record? And we will talk about that in this video because it's highly significant. In trying to answer that question, how big is too big and how much does size matter in this fight? I've done my research for this one, and there's a couple of details that I think you'll find very interesting that might even sway your pick going into this fight. And I've got a hypothesis about Canelo that might seem a little bit counterintuitive. Just before I jump in, don't forget to bang a like on the video if indeed you do like it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and get your comments in the comments section below. What do you think about the weight in this fight? Is Canelo going to be too big? Do you think Crawford can handle it? Is this going to be the best Crawford we've ever seen? Now, as I say, I made that Crawford video, and where I want to begin in this video is with just how much I think Crawford is going to weigh coming into this fight, to give us an understanding of what the size difference will likely be. Now, when he fought Israel Madrimov, that was at the 154-pound weight limit, but when Crawford actually got into the ring on fight night, he was actually the heavier of the two men, clocking in at 169.8 pounds. We'll call it 170 just for the ease of the video, but 170 pounds at 154. That's a very, very solid rehydration. That is a very good weight for a 154-pound fighter. And our man Canelo Alvarez gives us evidence and testament to this. I've gone back through the years to have a look at what Canelo weighed in the ring when he fought 154 pounds to give us context as to the size difference. And don't get me wrong, Canelo will be bigger now than he was back then, but Crawford will be too. Crawford will also put that extra size on. And whilst he's not experienced fighting with the extra weight, it will give us some kind of understanding of how much of an issue it might be. We'll take everything into account, but just to begin with, you know, how big is the size difference? Well, going back and looking at some of these fights, we'll start with the Floyd Mayweather fight. So that was a 152-pound catch weight. And I said in my tactical video that Canelo was dehydrated for that one, that he wasn't at his maximum capability. Now, I still stand by that assessment because he was so green in his career, and because I feel his best performances have come at higher weight classes, and especially where he's not been having to cut lots of weight. But just for context in that one, he was 165 pounds in the ring versus Floyd that night. Meanwhile, Floyd Mayweather weighed 150.5 pounds, so there was actually a 14.5-pound weight difference that night. So you start to understand where I'm going with this in this video. I want to look at the context of where there's been weight gaps before. So someone who was 14.5 pounds lighter than Canelo was able to beat him on that night. Now look, Mayweather is an all-time great. Mayweather was unbelievably skilled and had soldiers tied up in knots. He couldn't do anything with him. But let's look at some other fights for some more context. When he fought Austin Trout, they were around about the same when they got in the ring. When they fought at 154 pounds, Canelo was 172 and Trout was 171. And that's really interesting to look at because that tells us that Canelo was only a couple of pounds heavier than Crawford when rehydrated when he fought at 154 pounds. And I think the one that really interests me, that people got kind of annoyed with me for talking about, I don't really know why, and I'd love to know why if you were someone who got annoyed with me about it, was mentioning the Lara fight, because Lara, I felt, had a very competitive fight against Canelo. I'm not saying he beat him necessarily, although you could argue he won that fight. But the reason I looked at that was because Alvarez hasn't fought many movers, many technicians who are good on their feet, have good boxing IQ, and in particular can fight in the southpaw stance. That's why I feel that Lara fight is relevant. And whilst Canelo will have improved to some degree, you have to go back and look at the times when he's fought people whose style I feel Crawford can replicate to some extent, because there's always going to be styles that trouble you. When you're a certain kind of fighter like Alvarez, he's not super adaptable in the ring. He does change certain little things, but ultimately his style is the same thing all the time. Come forward, pressure fighting with a counter-punching style. High guard, you guys have seen it, the lunging. Go and watch the tactical breakdown if you want to see more about that. But the reality is, with Canelo over and over again, we've seen how he fights these movers, these slicker guys. But when he fought Lara, it was at 154 pounds, of course. And interestingly, Canelo once again rehydrated to 171. Lara was 166 pounds. So there was a 5-pound weight difference. But that 5-pound weight difference didn't matter so much when you kept Canelo moving, when you made it difficult to hit, when Lara made himself difficult to hit, when he made it hard for Canelo to close the gap. Certainly, Canelo seemed like the more powerful man in there, but it was still highly competitive, and Lara made the 5 pounds less of a factor by making that Canelo couldn't really plant his feet. Now, at the other end of the scale, we have Canelo nowadays up at 168, where he's very close to his walking around weight. His walking around weight is around about 180, so he's only cutting about 12 pounds. He said this himself, 180, 182. He confirmed that when he fought Bivol, and so he was basically saying when he fought Bivol, which was light heavyweight, 175 pounds, that the weight cut wouldn't be particularly significant for him, only 7 pounds. And interestingly, when Canelo fought Edgar Berlanga recently, it's estimated that Berlanga got into the ring around 200 pounds. You know, that's a significant weight difference, and I think all of this is to say is that Canelo himself has been in the ring and had difficult fights against guys previously who were lighter than him, and it really came down to the style matchup being difficult for him. Yes, the extra weight told in the end, in the sense of they had to fight so much on the back foot that Canelo had enough success. Obviously not against Floyd, but against Lara, you know, the size difference was a bit too much. The power was a bit too much that Lara couldn't quite get the win. I mean, arguably you could say he did, but yeah, in reality, Canelo was able to hurt him on the turn. He went to the body and hurt him up close. And sometimes when he's moved up, when he's fought at light heavyweight against the likes of Bivol, the skill plus the weight, again, it was just too much for Canelo. But most of the time, all this is to say is to make this point. This is what I mentioned in my intro, that there's something I want to say about Canelo that I think is true, that I might be wrong, but I think is true. I think Canelo finds it easier to fight heavier guys with worse feet than he does fight a light guy with better feet. For example, he has been outweighed by most of the guys he's fought 168 pounds by, 10, 15, 20 pounds consistently. And he beats them up because he's such a good puncher. He's such a skilled come-forward fighter. And he's just a bit too quick for them with his head movement. He's so good at counter-punching and he punches hard enough that he hurts them. And he's just technically very, very good, Canelo. But he would rather fight those guys because they're far more ploddy. Their foot movement's not as good. And he can get to them. So I think, I'm hypothesizing that he would actually prefer to fight someone who's heavier than him, who doesn't have a style that he doesn't like, because he does just punch that damn hard. I still think guys like Lara give him problems, even though the weight was his factor, the 5 pounds. And my main point here is this. I predicted in my Crawford weight video that he's going to come in on fight night 5 to 10 pounds lighter than Canelo. But the reality is that 5 to 10 pounds against Canelo, if you can box the right way, is not an insurmountable amount of weight. It is possible, if Crawford can box the right game plan and do it a bit better than some of his predecessors, that he can win this fight. So, we've mentioned that now. We've talked about the fact I do believe that Crawford, with a 5 to 10 pound weight difference, can be competitive against Canelo, because we've seen it before. And Canelo has slowed down to some extent now. I don't know how much he's slowed down. I don't think it's as much as people think it is, because realistically, he's hurt most of the guys he's been in with recently, and then they've just stayed away. They've not really been competitive or engaged with him. It neutralizes his style to a degree when you don't engage with him, because, as I say, Canelo's at his best when he can counterpunch. He wants to punish your mistakes, essentially. If you give him nothing to work with, he struggles. But I believe that Crawford, being the kind of fighter he is, the kind of competitor he is, he's going to give Canelo plenty to think about, plenty to potentially counter. But if he does it in the right, smart way that I think he can, then I think he could be okay too. So the second part of this weight video is really to discuss Terence Crawford and how I think the added weight is going to impact his performance in the ring. I'm pretty confident in saying that he'll be punching a bit harder, just because the added weight will be there with the technique. He's definitely a very good athlete. And looking at that weight video again, he walks around pretty heavy. And I don't know how out of shape he is, but I've seen on the scales he weighs up to 186 pounds. So he's already, even when he's at 170 in the ring, he's already brought himself down significantly. And I thought against Madrimov, I have to say this, I didn't think he looked much slower, if at all. I felt like he punched pretty hard because Madrimov didn't like getting hit by him in that fight. And gas tank-wise, I didn't see him particularly slowing down in there. So at 170, it was okay, but what's the limit with that? When you're someone who started out 135 pounds, what's the limit with, there's got to be a point where you get heavy enough that it starts to affect you. Even the likes of Manny Pacquiao, he went through all those weight classes. He was so brilliant. His punch resistance was still pretty good. His punch power was still pretty good, but he did stop knocking guys out. I guess for Crawford, the question is, can he still punch hard enough when he's in there, when he weighs in the ring around 175? That's where I think he'll be at when he gets in the ring, 175, 177. Can he punch hard enough to keep Canelo off? Can he move with the same speed, with the same fleet of foot? Will he get gassed, or can he do it for the rounds? These are the things that I'm not sure what the answer is. I think I'm confident in saying he'll punch a bit harder. I'm confident in saying that the foot speed, it may have slightly diminished, but not so much that it's significant enough that Canelo will find it easier to get to him. That's what I would say. I mean, he has to be a bit slower because he will be slightly heavier. But with that extra ability to have size on could come extra conditioning. It's a difficult one because sometimes when a fighter, as we've seen with Anthony Joshua, when you have extra muscle mass, there's more lactic acid buildup, it can burn more oxygen. It can be harder to keep the stamina up. But at the same time, because he'll have been able to train maybe harder than ever, because he will be so refueled on fight night, it might be that actually he's super fit and he does the rounds better than he's ever done them. I'm really not sure. I don't know what the answer to that question is. And we really won't know until we see him in there at 168 pounds at the weigh-in and then what he gets in there in the ring at. Because obviously he could just be 170 again, cut 2 pounds and get in there. But I've got a feeling, based on the fact that at the start of this camp, he was around 186, based on some of the images I've been seeing, the training shots, I watched the Netflix documentary, he does look a bit bigger than he normally does. So I'm incredibly intrigued to see how he does carry the extra weight. But I do think it's possible, is what I'm trying to say here. I do think it's possible. And I don't think Canelo is going to be looking to come in any bigger than he normally does because, you know, for him, he's going to need to be fast. He's going to need to be able to get to Crawford. And look, people are right in saying that Crawford's not known as being like this incredible mover, but he is known as being an incredibly good technical boxer with, you know, great tactical understanding, with unbelievable counterpunching. I still think if he can go in there and execute the right game plan and the weight isn't insurmountable, that he can do this. I'm not saying he will, and this isn't my prediction because I genuinely don't know which way I'm going to pick yet, and I will do my prediction video in fight week. I guess the point of what I'm trying to say here is that Canelo has had very competitive fights with people that were lighter than him before. He's lost to people that were lighter than him before. And actually, I think that he might prefer fighting heavier guys. He might not like the fact that Crawford is lighter, is a better mover than what he's been in with lately. I tried desperately hard to figure out what Billy Joe Saunders was on fight night, and there was some people saying he was around about 180, which would have been roughly the same as Canelo. So Canelo has shown he can get to the mover, but that was a really prime Canelo, and again, there's that factor of has he slipped a bit? I just don't know. I want to see him in there with someone who gives him something more to think about to be able to answer that question. But for sure, Canelo, since that Bivol fight, has not been in there with anybody who was stylistically problematic for him. I can say that with utter confidence. And the one thing that I'm just not going to be answered until they're both in the ring is how much Crawford's power has increased proportionally to the weight he's put on. You know, you can put the extra weight on and you can be in the weight roughly the same weight as Canelo even potentially. You know, he could be up at 180. He could genuinely be up at that weight. But will his power increase with the added weight enough that it matters? I wish I could make the prediction and tell you, but I just don't know. All I know is that some of the all-time greats, they've gone up and they've had enough pop. I think Usyk is the one for me that I look at and I go, he's still fighting guys 20, 30 pounds that are heavier than him. And he does punch hard enough to knock them out. I'm not saying Crawford is like Usyk, but the fact is that it is possible. And he might not have to be able to knock Canelo out. In fact, I hope it's not the case that he has to be able to knock Canelo out because I don't know if you can. I genuinely don't know if this is someone that can knock Canelo out because Canelo's chin is ridiculous. His head movement's still pretty good, even if it's not as consistently active as it once was. And his defense is very, very elite still. But yeah, there's definitely a few things to think about in this video. I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments section below. Can Crawford handle the extra increase in weight? Even though he's bound to be a bit lighter, will it matter? Can he go in and execute the tactics that we know Canelo will struggle with? And has Canelo slipped so much that it will be even more of a factor in this fight that, you know, I'd love to know your thoughts on that point I made. Does Canelo actually prefer fighting these bigger guys who are more ploddy, who are not the style that Crawford will be able to bring to the ring? I think so. I genuinely think he'd rather fight a massive guy. But look, kudos to Terence Crawford for doing this because Canelo wouldn't fight Benavidez because he said he was too big, even though he was at 168 pounds. He said, no, the guy's not really a super middleweight, even though he's making the super middleweight limit. Whereas Crawford's gone, hell, I don't care about that. Let me get paid. Let me get a legacy fight. Let me go in there and see how great I actually can be. I'm so excited and so intrigued for this fight, guys, but really, this is more of a discussion piece. I don't have loads of answers for you. All I know is that there's a chance that this could be unbelievably competitive. It could be unbelievably competitive, and I'm not sure what way it's going to go right now. I'm not sure. I really need to get my thoughts together to make my prediction, and I will do so in fight week. But as I always say, guys, thanks so much for sticking with me till the end. I hope you've all enjoyed this video, and as I always say, on to the next one.